Hi, welcome to Restrocast. Today, my guest is Jim Bitticks. He's the COO of Dave's Hot Chicken, one of the fastest growing fast casual concepts in the US today. Jim was an intriguing conversation because his journey from working in Jack in the Box as a 16-year-old to spending first 20 years of his life in CKE, rising up to the top position in operations, building Blaze Pizza for next 7 years, and now on to Dave's. One thing that remains constant is Jim is a chaser of scale, chaser of good things, while keeping the empathy for people extremely high. Somebody who was pulled ahead in life by people he worked with, but also somebody who's pulling people with him as he's growing. I found Jim to be, hungry to learn, to be self-aware, to go deeper in things. He is somebody who I found has a take on operations which is extremely people-oriented, human-oriented. He is somebody who, I think I've had the deepest chat on how to gamify something as boring as trainings in QSR operations. I loved this chat. I'm sure you're going to feel enriched watching this. Welcome to Restrocast. Jim, welcome to Restrocast.
Thank you.
A lot of good stuff that is happening at Dave's Hot Chicken. I actually want to dig in to that part of the conversation later. But in all your career, I see, three large pieces, three stints, the third one, going on. My belief is, and I say this a lot, I say this all the time, that people don't really plan to get into the restaurant space, how crazy this industry is and how crazy, it can be. People generally, in my opinion, fall into it. They just slide in, without knowing, or fall into the ditch. That happened to me long back. So what's your story? How did it all start? What were the early years?
Definitely the same way. I started when I was in high school. In the restaurant industry, I started working for a Jack in the Box franchisee in Tempe, Arizona, where I grew up. When I was 15 years old, I thought I would try to get a job, even though you're supposed to be 16. And I think I actually lied on my application. I made the year a different year, so it looked like I was 16. I got the job and sort of fell in love with the fact that I had my own money. 2 weeks later, grew up fairly poor. My mom was a student, and so we had food and a place to live, but like not new shoes, or I think Nintendo was new that year. Nintendo or Super Nintendo, I can't remember. But that was one of the things that I wanted to buy. The thing I bought with my very first paycheck was a bike. I got $181 on that check, so I bought a bike so I could get to work more. And then the next paycheck, I bought a Nintendo, and then it was about things and stuff for me. And I ended up working there for about a year before we moved away, and then I got another job, and so the restaurant industry just was easy to get a job in. It was on the way home, it was on the way to school, that type of thing.
But then how did it become a career? I mean, most of the 16-year-olds will say that they joined restaurant industry for pocket money.
Yeah.
But then what happened?
When I was 18, I was ready to move out, and so I sort of made the calculation that I could make more money if I took the next promotion that was offered to me, and so I sort of lived that life.
You were still working at Jack in the Box?
Actually, we moved away for 2 years. My mom finished school. She graduated with her doctorate, and we moved away so that she could find a job in her field. And then 2 years later, we came back. And when I came back, I started working for Jack in the Box again, and took a promotion to a hourly shift lead position for like, I want to say $5.35 an hour or something like that. Um, um, and I just sort of always reasoned that I should take the next um, promotion that's offered to me. More money, like I might as well do that. And so it sort of just fell into it. Yeah.
And what after that?
Fast forward, let's think about that for just a second. Fast forward a few years, and I had the opportunity to work for a company called Rally's Hamburgers. I worked there for 3 years before it was acquired. It's like this weird deal. CKE Restaurants, which is Carl's Jr., and Hardee's picked up Rally's as a franchise. Everything on the western side of the country they picked up, and they ran it for Rally's because Rally's was struggling. And I ended up working for CKE Restaurants, ultimately.
As a part of the acquisition?
Yes. Yeah. So they managed them for 5 years. And at the end of the 5-year period of time, they offered me a job to move to California. And so I moved to California to be a district manager by that point. I'd worked my way through the other layers. And so I moved to California and had the opportunity to move into like a regional director position, ultimately regional vice president of operations. I did that. That was my flow, or that was my path, if you will. After Carl's, where I worked for, I moved to Texas for 2 years. They expanded to Texas, and they were struggling about a year into the expansion, and they basically made me an offer I couldn't refuse to move there. I had moved a couple of times already within that time frame. And so we moved, my wife, myself, and our 3 little kids, moved to Austin, Texas. They hated the whole idea of it. They're just like so mad at me that we were moving. But it was a good opportunity. And 2 years later, they had switched out some leaders, and I had the opportunity to go to Blaze Pizza through a lady I used to work for who had landed there in their franchise sales department. She said, we need somebody for ops. And when we moved away from Austin, my kids were angrier that we were moving away from Austin. It was a great experience for them. Austin was really cool. Moved back to Southern California at that point, and joined Blaze Pizza when there were 2 locations open as the vice president of operations and training, sort of on a hope and a prayer that they were really going to do what they said they were going to do. They were an all franchise organization. They were going to sell franchises, and we're going to have, we used to say we're going to have 1,000 restaurants in 10 years. Never quite hit that goal, but when I left, let's see, in 2020, and I started at Blaze in 2013. When I left in 2020, we were up to about 372 locations.
Wow.
So from 2 to 372
in 7 years.
In 7 years, and we only had 4 company locations, 5 company locations at that point. The rest were all franchise. So it was sort of a whole whirlwind of activity and something totally different than what I had done before. I'd been on the company ops side of things my whole career prior to that. When we switched to the franchise side, now you're building all the systems rather than executing all the systems. And so that was really fulfilling, I think, to sort of like go, okay, like that didn't work over there, we're going to do it this way here.
But that's an interesting jump, right? So how long was the CKE in total?
A total of 17 years.
17 years,
Yes.
right? And like, why do you leave CKE to work for a pizza company with 2 locations?
So what happened at CKE is they did a private equity deal, which was great for me at the time. My biggest check I ever got, did all the stock options I had earned over the years. But what happens with private equity is, everything changes, and the focus of the organization changes, and there are lots of different adjustments that had to be made. One of them was that my direct supervisor retired literally 2 weeks after I moved to Texas, and with that leadership change, the entire organization just sort of morphed. And so by the time Blaze came knocking, it was actually a great opportunity to make a change. The new leader who came in was a really smart guy, really understood operations.
At CKE?
At CKE, yeah. He was somebody who I learned a lot from, and I don't know that he was intending to teach it, but his level of awareness in operations and his understanding of how things flow was something that I probably wouldn't have been able to articulate verbally, I could think it. I understood it. Like I understood like where you move when you do this or that type of thing. But one time at a new restaurant opening, it was very high pressure. He was trying to make a point, and I really there was a lot of this during that period of time. But I'll tell you that I feel like I learned a lot from him, and I got a lot of I advanced a lot in my understanding of how restaurants run, the operational flow. That I credit to him, and I credit.
This was your hindsight wisdom.
Yes, my hindsight wisdom. And actually, I don't even know if it was completely hindsight. In the moment, I thought I really learned something today, but it was really stressful. When I moved to Texas, I had just taken it over, and it was upside down. Um, he came in shortly after, and so the connection that he made was that Jim made it upside down. And so there was I think that's my assumption. And so there was a lot of pressure to fix it, and a lot of sort of him trying to be like push through some of the solutions that I had already instituted, and like, no, that's not going to work, type of thing. And so it just it wasn't the ideal situation, but it turned out to be great because I would never have left Carl's for the Blaze opportunity if everything had stayed status quo. I was living in San Diego before I moved to Austin, and we loved that life. Like, it was a great life. It was everything. Everything was really strong for us there. So I don't think I would have ever been incentivized to jump from Carl's to Blaze if not for the situation I found myself in.
But
In 2013.
was the the stock options, the cushion that you got also had a part in it, or was it just the unbearable, or you're not feeling?
Yeah. I think that in the corporate world, and specifically in the corporate world where private equity is involved, there's a lot of pressure on fixing financials. And Carl's situation in Texas was sort of upside down from the financial perspective. Lots of reasons for that. One of them is a really strong regional competitor, Whataburger, and there were just lots of pieces. And so that leadership change sort of made a big focus on, hey, we got to get this thing profitable really quickly, which I agree with. I mean, I was on that page as well. So it just changed the tone and tenor of the organization quite a bit. And I would be on these phone calls that were really stressful and just really uncomfortable, not life affirming types of phone calls. And I would hang up, or during the call, I'd get a phone call from a lady that has sort of been part of my career since I was 19. She's our chief development officer at Dave's. Her name is Carolyn Kennedy. And she would call, and if I picked up after the phone call with my then boss, and her first thing was like, Jim, you have got to come join us at Blaze Pizza. And I was like, it was sort of like I'm like this, hanging up the phone. I pick up the phone, and she's like this. And it happened 3 different times after 3 really, really bad phone calls.
I think she was the one who was making your manager do those things to you.
Maybe through some law of attraction or anything. Finally, on the third time it happened, I sort of had this like moment of like, I don't know if it was like an epiphany or just this realization that this keeps happening, and so maybe I'm missing a message. From my mom would say, "Oh, you got to listen to your spirit guides," and there was this moment where I sort of was like, am I missing something here? Am I supposed to be like paying attention to this? And so, as tough as my life was at that point, like as far as working with this particular leader and sort of the pressure that was there, I mean, if I had been unemployed in that moment and this job had been offered to me with this leader and all of the pressures, I'd take the job. I'd take the job, and I'm tough. I can get through it. So I sort of finally like opened my thoughts to the idea of maybe I should take a look at Blaze. I mean, when she'd call, I'd say, well, how many restaurants are you guys up to? And the first time she called, she's like, well, we have 1, and we're going to open the second one next month. And I was just like, I've got 3 kids. Like, you're crazy. Like, I can't make a change. I can't jump to, a company that is like not actually a company.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I finally like on the third time, I said, okay, I'm willing. I'm willing to open my mind to it. And we did a phone interview with the founder of Blaze. His name is Rick Wetzel. He and his wife, Elise, started the company and opened 2 locations within a couple of months of each other. And I got on this phone call on Halloween, actually, of 2012. And, the energy that came through the phone line, I was sort of like interested all of a sudden. And then I flew out for an interview, unbeknownst to my then boss or to Carl's, and it sort of like felt like it wasn't going to happen, like like the salary I was looking for, that was too high because they were just a startup, and there were just all these layers that you suddenly thought, oh well, this was a waste of my time. And I was in the airport, the Burbank airport, and I got this really, like high pressure email with some dumb stuff in it from my then leader. And I just remember going, whatever it takes, I'm going to Blaze. And I called Carolyn. I said,
Wow.
offer me something, give me something, whatever it is, I'll make it work. And they did. And 4 months later, 6 months later, by March of the next year, I was packed up and we were moving to Southern California again. It took a huge pay cut, no company car, like all the benefits you get out of a big corporate
Yeah.
structure like CKE. None of that existed walking into Blaze. So it was this total leap of faith. So it was really scary, but also turned out to be a really great decision. Landed at Blaze. There were only about 6 of us or 7 of us on that team at the very beginning, and started making plans for how we're actually going to build it out and do all the things that Rick had promised and Carolyn had promised on those phone calls.
How was that change for you, right? From starting with like starting at an early age, you always worked for large, well set processes, large corporation in the restaurants, right? And suddenly you could just build things, or you could imagine things, or
Yeah.
you were supposed to build it ground up.
Yeah.
How did that how did that work for you? What was it like the early time?
So what's funny is that when I was a kid, and it was just my mom and I, I'm a single. She was a single mom, and only me, only child. That's what it is. And we, we were just the 2 of us growing up, and so she created this, what would I call, like a sort of a capitalistic drive in me by paying me to do stuff, like paying me for chores or whatever. And so I liked comic books and I wanted money to buy comic books. So, she'd pay me $2 to clean the bathroom or whatever, and so that's how I got my own money. And so from an early age, it sort of built this sort of drive to make money. So when I could make money at a real job, it was really easy to say, I definitely want to, get a real job and, make my own money. And so what I think that created for me was sort of this entrepreneurial spirit that maybe wouldn't have been if I had grown up in a more affluent home where the money was just given, I just got a free allowance type of thing. And so along the way, throughout the entire career, I think I mentioned it, that every time I figured, well, I can make more money if I take the next step. I can make more money if I take the next step. And in running a restaurant or multiple restaurants, the idea of bonuses, quarterly bonuses, gets introduced to you once you're at the restaurant manager level, and you say, okay, well, how do I maximize my bonus? What are the things that I have to do, the levers I have to pull to make the most bonus money? And usually those are all around controlling costs and driving sales. And so that process that my mom trained me on of how do I make more money sort of came into play, where I would figure out okay, when I was a kid, I got more money if I cleaned the kitchen than if I cleaned the bathroom, or vice versa. I don't remember. But, and so I would always do those chores and offer up those jobs. Or the refrigerator, cleaning out the refrigerator was a high dollar, high value job for her. So I would always offer to do that. I would try to make the most money I could. And so with the bonus program or bonus system that you get introduced to, you start figuring out what are the ways that you can drive the most bonus money for yourself, and you start managing to it. And so that sort of just worked for me. It fit who I was or how I thought, and those opportunities just led to additional
So as
opportunities.
as somebody who's designing operations, and I think this is very interesting because operations is I don't know if I should call it thankless job, but I would say that a lot of operations people don't really are incentivized all the time
Yeah,
because they're just supposed to make, like, they're the part of the machine that needs to move, right?
yeah,
So they're expected to do what they do.
yeah.
As an operations leader, did you also introduce, or do you look at your team's life that way as well, where for like, do you incentivize your entire ops some way?
Sure. Maybe not as much financially. Like the assistant manager, the shift leads, I would share a portion of the bonus with if we made a good bonus. But I think that that whole entrepreneurial spirit sort of drove me to like find the most efficient way to achieve whatever goal, whether it's the food cost goal or the labor goal, or when I was at rallies for 6 months, they ran a program because they were very focused on trying to drive the service levels up, and so they introduced a mystery shopper program that they ran for 6 months, and they would do 2 shops a month, and if you passed both shops, the manager would make $1,000 for each one. I don't know if it's actually true, but I was told at the time that I was the only one that did it for the entire period of time. I was the only one that made it. And what you end up doing is you end up like coming up with all of the, like, looking at the failed shops, or the shopper form, the program, and you go, okay, where are the spots where I could potentially lose the money, and then you fill those gaps. So like if you don't answer the guest at the speaker box within 5 seconds, okay, so now everybody has to you have 2 people wearing a headset type of thing, and I mean it's not anything that's like life altering or earth shattering in any way, but they're the things that you start to do to sort of fill in the gaps. And so that whole entrepreneurial drive of like, I want to make more money, um, drives you to create systems and procedures that make it more efficient, more profitable, make the business more efficient and more profitable.
It's interesting that how naturally this occurs to you. The fact that instead of saying that you know I figured how to make more money, you said that I figured where can I lose money and just fill the gaps.
Sure.
Right? That's actually what Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger keep saying as well.
Interesting.
That if you want to make money by investing, just make sure you don't lose it.
Yeah.
Everything else will take care of itself.
Sure.
Just don't lose it.
Well, I landed at our busiest restaurant in the Arizona market for rallies, and the budget they gave me one year was like sort of stupid. Like it was ridiculously high. Like how am I gonna do that? How am I gonna? I don't even remember what the increase was, like probably 10% without any like additional external advertising dollars being spent or anything. It just sort of gave you this budget, and so the challenge that I was presented with is, how do I drive the sales to this number, whatever the number was, without any of those external components. So I would say I'm fairly creative. I try different things, and so I sort of calculated it out, and I needed to make, I don't know, $100 more a day or whatever the number was. And so I said, okay, how do we make $100 more a day? Well, then you start really pushing add-on sales. So we did a couple of different things. A guy I worked with at the time, he was a funny guy. I'm somewhat of a funny guy, and we used to come up with sort of ways to challenge each other to make a guest laugh. And you do something like hand them like a straw that was like crushed, that came in the box crushed, and the guest would just look at you like, what the hell? And you're just like, just kidding, here you go, like that type of stuff. But if I could just sell more cheese, I'd increase the number of dollars. But it was so uncomfortable to sell cheese, to say like, did you want cheese on your rally burger? That is, I don't know, it just feels like you're selling vacuum cleaners, or you're doing that, you're imposing, and I hate that. And so between the two of us, we came up with like, how do you say it the best? And so we started saying, oh, and hey, by the way, on your rally burger today, did you want that with or without cheese? And they would, 7 out of 10 people would go, oh, with cheese. It just sort of reframed it, or sort of changed it.
Nice.
And so it became the norm of the way we would try to sell it. And then the other thing we did was came up with Rally's has a product on their menu called the Big Buford. It's a double cheeseburger, double meat, double cheeseburger. And so I started having a today's feature. And the idea of the today's feature is that it was existing products that we've added like bacon or jalapenos or something to additional cheese, or we mean like a triple cheeseburger, that would make the price
Yeah.
$1 higher or whatever. And the one that was the most popular was the double bacon, double cheese, which was just a Big Buford with bacon. But we would introduce it like, "Hi, my name is Jim. Would you like to try the double bacon, double cheeseburger combo meal today?" And that we'd sell, I don't know, like 50 to 75, some days 100 of those, which was $1 more per combo. So anyway, bottom line of that story is that I made the budget, and we made the budget by like trying to squeeze more out of the existing guests that were coming through. And so that idea of like, how do you, like the operationalization of the pieces, how do you make it more efficient? How do you make more sales? How do you do whatever? You learn your way through it as you grow up. I think in the restaurant industry, you figure out the ways to make it.
As a
Make it work.
leader, does this also affect your perception of how you value people around you? Like, do you tend to value chasers more than, the settlers?
Ish. I think it depends. So the further you go up, I think you definitely want some chasers, but you have to have settlers, because you can't have everybody like looking for a way up constantly. Not at least not until you get bigger and bigger. You always want people that want more, because they'll try harder, but there are also people that get bored and then they want to jump out, and so then you've got turnover, potentially, or whatever. I think that the higher up you go, the more you value, like the value system sort of changes. Going back to the idea of like the sales piece, or you definitely value the people. In that particular scenario, I had a couple of guys that could run the drive-through all by themselves. And this restaurant that I'm talking about, we only were busy from like 11:30 to 1:30. And on the Rally's deployment system at the time, like the volume that we were doing would require like 15 or 16 people working. But once the lunch rush was over, you're only having 4 people working. So where are you going to get 10 or 11 people that are willing to work 2 hours a day only for 5 days a week? It just, the part-time, it just didn't work. So you really needed people that were willing to hustle and push through it. So what I did in that situation is I created some free overtime, basically created a system where employees could, if they worked 11:30 to 1:30 every day, they could also close every night. They could get 45 hours a week if they were willing to do that. So that way I could staff it with enough people that we weren't upside down, which then allows you to build sales, because you can suggestive sell and you can do all the things. And then I had a couple of like superstar people who could do like a lot by themselves, and
High throughput.
Yeah, high throughput people that were willing to like bust their butts. So I think that's sort of the essence of like the capitalistic system, because there's people that want to make more money, or want 45 hours a week, or want their weekends off, or whatever, are willing to do everything it takes to get there. So yeah.
7
so
years.
They're chasers on at least some level.
Yeah,
think.
no, I see that. I also understand what you're saying, because that's a part of your evolution as well, right? When you start realizing that each part of the pyramid is important, and settlers at times are, they bring in a lot of stability. But at the same time, your natural inclination, for example, mine, my natural inclination is, I actually like high ownership thinkers. I tend to just people who get shit done, but at the same time can put their thought in it. I tend to be with them much more than just settlers. I respect them, but I'm not somebody who who enjoys company of settlers a lot, and I don't mean any disrespect. As I said, I had my own evolution where there used to be disrespect in my head long back. I used to think that, oh, okay, not ambitious enough. But then, as business grew, I run a tech company. I realized that, hey, you know what, stability is as important, or rather at times more important than chase as you grow. So
Yeah.
I hear you there.
Well, it's funny because like at this level now, as president of Dave's, the executive team that we've assembled, the chief, the C-suite, the C people, we have a really strong team, and they are people that are really good at their jobs and they're chasers. And you definitely want, at this level, you definitely want each one of those people as caretakers of their departments or of their disciplines that are looking for the next sort of thing, like always looking for, okay, what do we do now to push it further? I would say that everybody on our C-suite team is that way. Our chief technology officer, his name is Leon Devoyant. He's always like, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that, and kind of coming in with new layers or new levels of things. Our chief marketing officer, Brad Haley, is like that also. Sort of like, thinking a year in advance of like different PR or earned media opportunities that that you have to be out that far on, and that's much better than a year ago. Neither of those two guys, or a year and a half ago, neither of those two guys were on our team in their current roles, and we didn't have that level or that layer of push. Our CEO, Bill Phelps, he's like that too. He's an interesting guy because he'll say, like, he'll have a piece of paper in front of him. He'll go, "What are your thoughts on?" And some, it's not off the wall, but you go like, "I kind of like that idea," And so I think he set the tone on thinking and on pushing a little. And I think you see that in the organization, sort of trickle down for sure.
So what I hear is that at Dave's, you're thriving amongst people who are chasing, who are pushing the growth.
I feel like we've hit our stride in the last, we've done pretty well, and I'm not saying that we've been lagging in any way. I think that in the last year and a half, with some of the additions to the team that we've made, we've really seen the lift, and you feel like, okay, like we can keep this going. Like before, you're sort of like, okay, like we need more, we need something else, and now I definitely think there's.
I want to come back to Dave, a little later.
Sure.
7 years, 372 Blaze pizzas.
Yeah.
7 years, 8 years almost, right? How was that? Like, give me a view of that journey.
Unbelievable. When I joined the team, we had 2 locations open, and I sort of and nothing produced or developed to open a third. Like there were no training materials, there were no job aids. There was sort of a recipe pamphlet, like 2 pieces of paper folded in quarters, with how you made everything. They had a chef who was really smart guy. He had all sorts of degrees in food science and culinary and business, and really smart founders that were marketers by trade and serial entrepreneurs. But the idea of like, how do you scale it? How do you do restaurant number 3? How do you do restaurant number 4? How do you do restaurant number 5? We didn't have that, and we didn't have any level or any sort of focus on speed of making the pizza down the line. In fact, because it was very chef driven, we sort of had the opposite approach of, you press every dough ball fresh. You make everything sort of like in the moment, and we'd have lines out the door, and you'd see people like kind of look at their watch and like not be able to stay, type of thing. And so one of the first focuses that I had was, how do we speed this up? How do we make this go faster? Within sort of what the chef would deem was reasonable for the food quality, and then what we could sustain over time. And then also the layers of like the service pieces. So that was my focus when I landed at Blaze, was how do I make it go faster, and how do I make the service match the quality of the food? When I tried Blaze for the first time, I remember sort of like thinking like, it's whatever, it's okay. And I made whatever pizza down the line, and it cooked in 3 minutes and it came out to your table and you could smell it and it smelled really good. And you took the first bite and you're like, wow, that's really good. But the whole experience of making the pizza was sort of, it wasn't, I mean, it was just sort of very calm. There wasn't, it seems really fun to make your own pizza. Like, like, oh, I want some of that and I want some of that and I want some of that. But that wasn't really coming through the process or the service levels. And so,
You mean from the customer perspective,
Yeah.
like the order taking?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You just went down the line. There were like, 2 or 3 employees that sort of like, what else can I get you? Or did you want this? Or did you want that? But there was no like, energy behind it or no joy of like making the pizza down the line. So we messed around with the scripting and, like pushing people to like make eye contact. And we forced everyone to say, hi, how are you today? Or something like that. And it just sort of changed the service levels and the service layers. And then we put a lot of pressure on moving pizzas down the line very quickly so people wouldn't get bored, so people would move through it. You sort of like compared to Chipotle and trying to go as fast as Chipotle went to get you down the line. That was sort of our goal. And we put a lot of emphasis on that. We built out all of the training materials in a really short period of time. I think I joined in March
2013.
Yeah, of 2013, and we started hosting our first trainees in June. And so that's like a 3-month turnaround on everything. I brought in a guy that was really young. I think he was 21 or 22. He worked at Carl's with us, and his name's Juan Lopez. And he and I built like all of the training materials, all based on what they were already doing, and some adjustments that we made along the way. But we built all of that stuff really, really quickly, and then started opening. I think we opened our very first or a third location, our very first franchise location, the first week of July of that year, on stuff that was sort of like 3/4 of the way done.
Wow.
Systems that were sort of 3/4 of the way done.
But from that point onwards, it was almost like what, 50 restaurants every year. I mean, of course, I'm sure it was not linear, but
yeah, the first year was
Yeah,
8.
that's-
We opened 8 by the end of 2013, so a total of 10. And then the next year, I want to say we opened 30, I think.
as an ops
30
leader,
or 40.
like, what did you learn more through this? Because I'm sure like journey up to from 2 to 372, you might have seen all kinds of, or
Yeah.
what kind of breakdowns? What were the challenges that you rose up to, or what built you? What are the things you remember as, maybe milestones or anecdotes where you feel that, all right,
Yeah.
those were the moments where like we were either in a ditch or, came out really smart.
So I was I grew up in the Carl's Jr. system, and when Carl's opens a new restaurant, they send what they call an all-star team, and it might be 4 to 8 restaurant general managers from another market. And at the time there were like 1,200 Carl's Jr.'s open. There were 400 and maybe 425 or 450 company-operated restaurants. And so as we were opening Texas, you'd have these all-star teams, and it was fairly easy to bring people from these other markets. At Blaze, we only had 1 company-operated restaurant when we started. We technically had 2, but we sold one right away so that they'd be able to publish the sales and stuff that you weren't able to talk about without it being like made a record. And so it was sort of a strategy that Rick and Elise had to sell that first location, and then that way the sales were like sort of made public. There's the sales, and so the ability to open 40 or 50 restaurants a year on a base of 1 location was, in my mind, probably going to be impossible. As it turns out, it wasn't impossible because it's ultimately just a function of money and of carrying a staff or a team. So that was a big learning for me. Is sort of like as it started to work, you go, okay, I can see how this can play out or how this works. I would say the biggest challenge is sort of conveying the essence of the brand to brand new people. So if you think about franchising, and if you think about franchising a brand new brand, what you have in franchising is you have a bunch of rich people who have been successful in the past. They were successful when they opened this other brand, or they were successful when they did this or that. And so they sort of walk in the door with the notion and the understanding that they're successful people, and that
entitlement is there.
Less entitlement, but more self-sufficiency or self-trust, where they believe that they're they've been successful.
Yeah.
So, and they've done that by following their gut or their instincts or whatever. And so to convince them like, hey, we're going to do it this way here, there's an enculturation. I think that's a word. There's an enculturation process where you're building trust and credibility with them that it's going to work. And just like anybody, they walk in, they go, well, at XYZ brand, we would never open on a Friday. You always open on a Monday, which was true at Carl's also. But one of the challenges on our side of it is we had to support it with a 5 or 7 person training team. And if you open on a Monday, I probably can't keep enough people there to get you through your first weekend when you are actually busy. And so then, without it costing more, it cost us more than the franchise fee, actually. So I sort of flipped how we were doing it, and we do a soft open on a Thursday, and the big grand opening, which was a free pizza day, on a Friday, which is sort of antithetical to the way most restaurants open. They sort of do this slow and steady.
You slide in through,
slide it in
through the week. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I referred to the leader at Carl's where I learned a lot from. We were at a new restaurant opening in Houston, Texas, and he was there to put some pressure on this opening. And we were walking around the restaurant, and he goes, these cars are moving too slow. And I said, it's the first day. And he said, it's the first day, but you have 25 people working. And it was one of those moments where you go, because you normally have like for breakfast 4 people or 5 people. He's like, you have 20 extra people working. And there was this moment where you go like, that's a pretty good point. That's one of those moments when you go, okay, I agree with you. Actually, when you say it that way, when you phrase it that way, like what he said made a whole lot of sense to me. And so that thing where I go back and figure out, okay, well, where's the gap then? Like I do have 25 people working. He's not wrong. And besides 25 people, I also have like 6 trainers that are working. Okay. And the 6 trainers are there to like guide and support, but still you're supplementing. And he said it. He said, you're supplementing the lack of experience by having additional people. And so why is there no sense of urgency was the question I walked away with. Like, why don't we have a sense? Because we're not training it into the training process. We didn't build in sense of urgency. So during my Carl's period of time, after that opening, I said, okay, how do I build in sense of urgency? And how do I make the training process really engaging for these employees that they want to like push orders out quickly? So I started building in games into the training. This is, gamification is like, what we talk about like with electronic or digital versions of training, but this was in real life, the gamification of the training. And so started doing sense of urgency activities.
Entire capitalism is real life gamification, but.
Yes. So we started building in speed of service urgency, sense of urgency types of games into the training for the next restaurant. And one of them was like at the time or just right before this period of time, there was a show, Minute to Win It. I think Guy Fieri was the host at the time. And he had all these like, you have 1 minute to get something done. So I sort of copied that, and we built in this, the Oreo cookie challenge, where you put an Oreo cookie on your forehead and you start like manipulating your facial muscles to get it into your mouth. And it was a timed activity, and you got everybody sort of like putting pressure. It was a great icebreaker. It was a lot of fun. And it was like this idea of go fast, go fast, go fast. We built in several other games also, including something I learned at a resort with my kids. It was called Family Puzzle Challenge, where you had this like floor-sized puzzle that you try to build against other families, and whoever wins gets a sundae. We used to close out the training with this family puzzle challenge of different groups of teams, but the idea was like teamwork and like everybody's like working with each other, and it's timed. And by the 3rd day of training, it went from like a 7-minute process to magically a 3.5-minute process, which, by the way, 3.5 minutes was the service time goal.
Wow.
So all the things connected, we manipulated the pieces so that you would land on that. So like on the first day when they're doing the puzzle, it would be in a closed box and all the pieces are like scrambled and upside down. On the second day, the box has been dumped on the table, but all the pieces are upside down. On the third day, which is the last day, all the pieces are face side up, and you put a leader in charge that gives them instructions on let's start with edges and light colors and whatever. And so by the third day, they're able to get it done in 3.5 minutes, and it's like this big like break the board moment. But it created like that urgency so that you weren't introducing speed or sense of urgency on the first day open. We were introducing it from the beginning, which then connected to when we did Blaze. We built all of those same games into
That is
the
awesome.
Blaze training.
Does anybody else, I mean, any other brand is doing this as a part of the training program?
I have no idea, but I know Carl's
This is
was
awesome. This is
Blaze was, and now Dave's does, because it worked. But so with Blaze, it's so funny because Blaze was all about cooking a pizza in 180 seconds, a 3-minute cook time on the pizza. So we made the goal to get people down the line in 3 to 5 minutes and make the pizza get out to the guests in 3 to 5 minutes. So a total time of 10 minutes. So that Blaze experience, which was like high stakes, high pressure, where I was like trying to like not even save my job. I don't think my job was at risk per se, but sort of prove to that leader like, okay, I got it. I get what you're saying to me, and like turn it into a stronger overall experience as we were growing in Texas. I just took that stuff and just transplanted it over to Blaze, and it worked really well. It made the training process really fun. It created that. It helped to create that trust or that connection to the franchisees when they saw the road show of their training team show up and do like all these funny things that got the employees engaged really quickly. All the icebreaker activities of the Oreo cookie thing, or emptying a Kleenex box one sheet at a time as fast as you can, or we did a Skittles relay race. Like we started to build in like teamwork stuff that really created a feeling of fun and energy, which I think translated to the process going down the line. And so I give his name is Chef Brad Kent, a lot of credit for the food. He gets all the credit for between he and Elise Wetzel and Rick. They built the flavor profile of how good Blaze is. And I think our team, when we landed, we built the service profile, how we were going to serve the guest, and how we were going to make the service match the ta-da or the wow moment of eating the food. It's like I used to use the example of have you ever seen the movie The Sixth Sense? At the end of the movie, it's like 25 years old, so I'm going to spoil it. Like if you haven't seen it, I'm sorry. At the end of the movie, you have this realization that Bruce Willis's character has been dead the whole movie. You don't know the way they shoot it and the way they show it. Bruce Willis is like talking to his wife, and he's talking to this little kid, Haley Joel Osment, and he's like interacting, or he seems like he's interacting. But what you realize at the end of the movie, when they show like quick flashbacks, no one ever replies to him. He's just in the scene talking to his wife, and his wife doesn't say anything. She just sort of like walks by him, and he goes, but you don't catch it because of the way they shot it, the way they cut it and everything. And it's that moment at the end that's like, oh my God, like I can't believe that happened. That was the goal, is that when a guest bit into the pizza, that hit of flavor, like the crispiness of the dough, like all of the pieces, like, and it's just like this moment when like the service, like everything they just had going down the line matches the food, and you go, wow.
Yeah, just culminates into that one.
This place is amazing. Like this is a great place because of the
beautifully
service.
explained.
Yeah,
and I'm also going to watch that movie now.
Okay, you have to watch it. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. So that was what I say. My team and I created was that sort of the service and the speed that matched the quality of the food.
As a operations leader, how much did you or rather, like, did you keep customer feedback or reviews or any rating as a benchmark, not the indirect one, right? But as a direct feedback, did you keep that at the center, either the organization or you?
Yeah. So actually, what's interesting is that I'm a big believer in old school mystery shoppers, and the reason I'm a big believer in it is on my very first day at Jack in the Box. I was filling drinks. I had watched the drinks video, and I came down and I was ready to fill drinks. And in the drinks video, there was like a redheaded girl that was like, "Hi, Mr. Jones. It's great to see you again." You know, like she's just super friendly and interactive. And, you know, that's the role model or the example that they're saying you're supposed to be. And I start working, and the manager, shift leader, whoever was in charge said, "Hey, and make sure you do everything right. We're waiting on our mystery shopper." And I go, "What's that?" He said, "Somebody you're not going to know who it is, and if you do a bad job, you get fired." And so the next thing you know, I'm like, "Hey, you know, how you doing today? Like, here's your Diet Coke for you," you know. And I was like, just role modeling or displaying what I saw role modeled, you know, just giving it back. And I talk about mystery shoppers with everybody. The idea behind mystery, because people think it's antiquated. People think it's not. Like at the end, towards the end at Blaze, when things, when there's a lot of pressure on profitability and changing certain things, one of the things we got rid of was the mystery shopper program, which I think was a big mistake, because mystery shoppers and that the idea of somebody coming in and sort of checking up on you, it's like the idea of when you're driving on a road and there's a cop with his radar gun. You eventually become conditioned to know that there's always a cop on this corner. And so you automatically slow down. You automatically follow the rules or whatever. Or when you see a sign that says, you know, radar detection and use or whatever, you know what to do.
Yeah, for all you know, that radar gun may be a dummy.
Yep. And for all you know, there is no plane in the air testing your speed. You just are like, uh-oh. Mystery shopper programs, if they're done well, I think they create what I call invisible guardrails for the employees in the restaurants, employees at all levels. And especially if it's then connected back to like compensation. And I use the example that I said earlier about when I was at rallies, when we were able to make $1,000 a month by passing your mystery shoppers. You teach to the test. You teach your team all the things that you know will lose you money or will lose you points. You know, if you do it right, in my opinion, you connect the money to the mystery shopper points, and now you've got a system that's sort of doing all of the things the way they're supposed to be doing them, because it's, you know, it's connected to them directly.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of mystery shopping. I think that it's, I mean, in every business,
Yeah.
in every way, they're like mystery shopping is like,
Yes.
it's the acid test of your,
Yes.
you know, what you say that your business
Yes.
or your service stands
Yeah.
for.
It's the objective measure. So like comment cards or Google comments or Yelp comments, those are the subjective measure. That's a guest who says to somebody, "Oh, the bathrooms were so dirty. And if their bathrooms are dirty, what about their kitchen?" You know, that's that guest's sort of like focus or their lens that they look at everything. Your mystery shopper program is your lens, your company's lens. Like, did I get the right number of napkins? Was my pizza served at the right temperature?
Yeah.
We started at Blaze with 8 mystery shoppers a month. When I was a kid, Jack in the Box used to do 4, and so you were never,
it is big. Yeah,
you were never resting. You didn't rest at Jack, you know, because you were like, oh, like you knew that you were going to be held accountable for that result. And so, and Jack used to use bonus points. If you did the service pieces, there were bonus points. So we built our mystery shopper program at Blaze with bonus points. We did 8 shops a month, 2 a week, essentially. And we focused the entire service model on that. About, I want to say 3 or 4 months after I started at Blaze, Rick and Elise brought in a president and COO. His name was Jim Bix. Industry veteran, has done a lot of things. Everybody knows Jim. He's sort of like, he knows a little bit about everything. I still use him to this day as a mentor. He's my phone a friend on anything that I don't know about. I call Jim. I say, "What do you know about this?" Or "How do I do this?" And he'll go, "Oh, that's easy. Call so-and-so," or whatever. And one of the things when he landed in there was sort of this support of the shopper program and the idea that we would do monthly rewards for the best performers between him and Carolyn, who I mentioned earlier, who were really like instrumental to like helping create the structure to that system. Between the three of us, we sort of built the system around guest service, and the Jim brought in a company at the time called New Brand Analytics. They since got bought up, and I don't know who has them now, but he started us looking at the daily Yelp and TripAdvisor and whatever Zomato or whatever it was scores, and sort of organizing the company around guest feedback, which turned out to be really helpful. Like I think at our peak, we had an average rating of 4.4 stars at Blaze, which was really strong.
Average across restaurants?
Across the system, yeah.
Wow.
Where it started to go downhill is when we pulled out the shopper program, when we changed some of the scripting, because there were a lot of complaints that it was too robotic, and so we changed it a little bit. And I mean, we try to be collaborative with franchisees. We try to include their essence, or like what they're seeing and how they feel. And so we made some adjustments, and I think really that's where we started to see those things slip a little. But when we pulled the mystery shopper program, I think we really lost.
I think looking at mystery shopper program as a cost center is what I've seen, in past where businesses, after a point, right? I think what you're saying, 4.4 across restaurants average, right? It's almost magic.
Yeah.
And somebody said this to me recently in some other context, and he said, magic experienced over a long period of time feels like a norm.
It does.
So somebody needs to knock your head again and say, hey, you know what? This is magic.
Yeah.
Just because you're experiencing it every day, it feels like a norm. And that's where, probably some of these things, go downhill, because the value of these programs, you don't feel them quarter on quarter or month on month, because nothing is breaking.
But there are nuances too that you build into the system. So we put in bonus points for saying yes to special requests. So if you think about what Build Your Own Pizza is all about, so there's two things it's about. It's about pizza fast enough for lunch. That was sort of the business proposition that Elise and Rick were trying to solve for. They said, like, they'll tell the story, like when they started looking at doing pizza, it's like, why would you do pizza? Like, there's so many pizza places. The pizza is like just this gigantic category. And they said they started like kind of like dissecting it, and they found a big gaping hole in the middle of pizza, and it was pizza fast enough and affordable enough for lunch. So unless you worked in a mall and you could go to Sbarro, or unless you were like in like New York City or whatever, you could buy a slice, having pizza for lunch, like in an office, just wasn't a thing. It wasn't available. So they wanted to create a pizza for lunch concept, sort of like Chipotle. You could go, walk down the line, have a burrito, within 5 minutes of, getting there. And so they started building it on that, but it had to be fast. And so that's the other piece of it. It's got to be really fast in order to be able to do it, because pizza always had like 45. You'd call and be like 45 minutes before it was going to get delivered to your house, or maybe an hour. And so that whole speed thing became like sort of the driving force. But it's build your own. It's that individual pizza. So like, like the way if you were ordering from Domino's, you may not like mushrooms. I like mushrooms. So you have to get like half a pizza. It's like a whole thing. And so the idea that I can go down the line and get my own pizza my way, it's complicated. It's a little bit complicated, but it really is sort of part and parcel for what that experience is supposed to be. So we created bonus points in the shopper program, designed around saying yes to guest requests. We created bonus points in the shopper program for going out to the table and like picking up people's trays or interacting with them. And so it created an incentive, because you might get dinged maybe on the speed, or you might get dinged on some other thing. But I think it's very reflective of how guests actually experience your restaurants. Like, it's not just a set number, like, oh, they were slow today, like I'm pissed. It's more like I'm willing to wait, especially when the service is good or when the food is good. And so I think we got a lot of mileage out of that program. We got a lot of mileage out of the mystery shopper program, doing 2 a week. It just created this push. We paid for it out of our ad fund, out of our what we would call the creative fund, for years and years. It's when we switched and wanted to put money into like actual ads or actual creative, where we started pulling the shopper program back, which it just changed. It just changed the
No, but
flow.
that's exactly how it should be, right? I mean, technically, a good mystery shopper program is going to bring your customer acquisition cost down because
Yeah.
your repeat rate is going to go up.
Yeah.
So
And
your
the
throughput per
word of
customer,
mouth.
word of mouth is going to be
Yes.
high, right? So
Yeah.
like a 4.4 rating across board is going to bring you more customers than
Yeah.
any, click or brand campaign can do.
Yeah, absolutely. So your question was like, what did we learn along the way? Some of those pieces are what we learned is like sort of doing it differently than what every other company has done. We supercharged the training process. It was a 2-week training program for franchise owners and their managers. When I was at Carl's, it was a 12-week training program when you brought someone in. So 3 months of training. We did a personal trainer approach, sort of like when you go to the gym and you've got a personal trainer helping you like exercise and whatever. We would do groups of 4 franchisees or franchisee employees with a trainer and a helper, and they were just focused on them the whole time. And so we created it was a 12-day program at Blaze that got you trained like completely on the system in 2 weeks, so that when you got to your restaurant, you were sort of like, to the extent that you could be in 2 weeks, ready to open your restaurant. There's some OJT that has to happen, and there's that sort of that process in the first 2 weeks where you're drinking from a water hose and you have to figure it out. But it was highly successful. We did almost the first 2 years we did it off of the base of one restaurant. Jim Bix, who I mentioned a minute ago, when he landed, he said, you got to have more restaurants. And so one of his big directives right off the bat was to get to open 4 company restaurants. So we opened 2 at the end of 2014 and 2 probably in the first quarter of 2015. So we got 4 restaurants open, and now we had a base of additional team members, and we also had cash flow off of the restaurant, so that helped. And so there were just some layers there that you sort of like, I learned anyway, some of the like the steps that you have to sort of make, or the stepping stones that you have to lay in order to be able to do it pretty quickly.
How did Dave's happen, and like what was the transition?
So in 2000, I want to say 2017, I believe, Blaze did a private equity deal, sold 40% of the company to Brentwood and Associates out of Southern California, and then they also sold 8% of the company to Al Shaya Corp, the MH Al Shaya Corp, out of the Middle East. And yes,
Al Shaya, the Middle East Al Shaya.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that's how we went. That's how we started opening restaurants in the Middle East. What that did a couple of things. One of the best things that it did is my whole focus after I landed at Blaze was I needed enough money to buy a house, because remember, I moved from Texas and I took this big pay cut and everything. I need enough money to buy a house. I need enough money to put my my daughter and my son. At that point, I had 4 kids, but I just, in my mind, I was like, I just need enough for the first 2. And the third one, if I have just a little bit, like I'll have enough time to make up. So I need enough money for a house and for school for Allie and Dylan.
Awesome.
And a year before my daughter was off to college, we did this private equity deal. I had some shares. I was able to sell half of them. I got the biggest check, by far the biggest check of my life. I had enough money to put down my house. I had enough money for actually all 3 kids. If they went in state, I'm covered, And so I was like, this was the best thing. But it also, just like what happened at Carl's with the private equity change, it totally changed the tone and the tenor of the organization. And, it was a great event for everyone who had, equity and stuff. And from that perspective, it was a very like challenging event from the perspective of how much it changed the company from that point forward. In the aftermath of that sale, there was the CEO changed out, and a lot of the C-suite left, and so I was almost I wasn't quite the last man standing, but I was almost the last man standing.
Oh, wow.
And in the meantime, Wetzel's Pretzels, which was founded by Rick Wetzel and Bill Phelps. And Bill had operated as the CEO for 26 years. He was also one of the original founding investors of Blaze Pizza, and Rick and Bill have been partners since even before Wetzel's Pretzels. They worked together at Nestle as marketing people. And so they, Bill and an investor by the name of John Davis, he's a movie producer. If you IMDb him, you'll be surprised by all the movies that you're like, oh my God. Like
Jim Davis?
John Davis.
John Davis.
Yeah, John Davis, yeah. The Bill and John found Dave's Hot Chicken and made a deal, and we're going to start franchising it. And I saw a post on LinkedIn when they opened the first or the third location, I guess. It was the third location.
Which year was this?
It was in 2019. Yeah. And things had gotten sort of rough, and like, it was just like, you know, things had changed at Blaze. And so I did this text to Bill saying, hey, I screenshotted the LinkedIn post. I said, congratulations. I knew Bill. I mean, I knew him. We weren't like buddies or anything like that, but I knew him and I had his number. And I was like, congratulations. If you ever need any ops advice or consulting, happy to help. And that was sort of my like, you know, like I was like winking, like, hey, if you know what I mean? Like just like testing the waters. Because the last thing I wanted to do was to change jobs, but it felt like sort of like there was this the sea change afoot of everything. And so I ended up chatting with him a couple of times. And as the months drew on, I sort of was like, I'm gonna have to find a new job. I'm gonna have to look for something else, because things were just sort of off the rails, and they were getting more off the rails. Like nobody was like saying, wait a minute, these are off the rails. They were sort of doubling down on the off the rails decisions and sort of some of the leadership changes, and it just was like, you know, we lost our way, to put it mildly. And COVID happened. And so all of a sudden we were all doing, you know, all the things that you hear everybody talking about to like get through COVID. And at the end of it, my mom, I'm not supposed to tell the story. Bill Phelps tells me, don't never tell the story. I'm going to tell it anyway. My mom is a believer in card readers and psychics. And she said, you should call, her name is Joyce. You should call Joyce. And so I called Joyce and I started talking through some of the stuff. And I mentioned Dave's Hot Chicken, and she said, that feels really good.
Oh.
And I go, what do you mean? And she said that what you just talked about feels really good. And she started asking questions that were so like spot on that you're just like, all right. So at the end of that phone call, I was like sitting there going, oh my gosh, like, what does that mean? And so I texted Bill. It was on a Sunday morning. I texted Bill and I said, I really want to come work for you at Dave's Hot Chicken. How do we make that happen?
Wow.
Or something. And he texted me back and he said, let's talk on Monday. And so basically he was interested in me and I was interested in Dave's because they needed some help at Dave's. And he reached out to the CEO at Blaze at the time and basically worked it out. And so like a month later, I started at Dave's, which was great. It was a great experience.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah, it was super good. It's sort of I skipped a step in that story that's really important actually. As things were sort of changing at Blaze, I was having this interaction, not negative, but just very like challenging interaction with one of the leaders at the time. And while I was sitting there, it was like a text thing. And while I was texting, my phone rang and it was Carolyn, the same one who used to call me all the time at Dave's. I mean, at Carl's, sorry. And I answered it and she goes, Jim, I was just at the new Pacific Beach Dave's Hot Chicken opening. We need you to come to Dave's Hot Chicken. And it was sort of like that moment, like that I had.
Caroline was at Dave's?
She was. She had signed on to be a franchisee. She was one of the C people who had left. She wasn't a franchise. She didn't have a restaurant open yet, but she had gone down to this Pacific Beach opening
Wow.
in the midst of COVID, and they were so busy and it was kind of rough. And she said, we need you to come to Dave's. You need to be at Dave's Hot Chicken. And I had that moment, that like epiphany moment of like where it was like deja vu, like it was happening again. But this time, because I sort of like knew the signs or whatever, that's actually what
Wow.
precipitated me calling. I told my mom about it, and she's like, "You should call Joyce." And so that thing right there connected me to it. And so, so I texted Bill on that Sunday morning. He said, "Call me on Monday," and basically, we had to play it all on the up and up. It was actually all on the up and up. I was the initiator. It wasn't.
But that is a phenomenal story.
Yeah, it was a very cool aspect to it.
Yeah, it actually is, and I need to tell you, I don't believe in astrology or psychics, but I was at last year I was at a spiritual yoga health and wellness retreat.
Yeah.
And these guys called a tarot reader on the side, just like a fun activity on the side.
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a part of the program. And my wife and me were there, and she happened to just pass by out of curiosity. She sat down and she said, "All right, let me open some cards for me."
Yeah.
And she came back almost in tears.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "What happened?" She said, "You need to go there." I looked at that reader and I was like, no, that's not happening. She said, no, something happened with me. Before I believe this, I need you as a test subject. If it happens with you also, then I don't know what it means. But if it doesn't happen to you, then okay, I'll just take it as a good chance. I said, okay. I went there. And like, as you said, right, the questions because she asked me that, okay, what questions do you have?
Yeah.
And I was like, the cocky, arrogant guy saying, I don't have questions. You tell me what questions do I have? And she asked me questions. Questions were spot on.
Yeah.
And so was the reading. I got terrified. Honestly, I was terrified. I was like, I'm never doing this again because I don't know where is that portal door which I won't be able to find back.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think when you were telling the story, I was like, oh damn, I know what it felt.
Yeah. Well,
but you acted on it, and you acted well.
Yeah. Well, every time I tell that story, Bill's like, don't ever tell that story again. But I think it's sort of cool. So as I've landed at Dave's, one of the founders, his name's Armand Oganesian. And he's the guy that created Dave's, like the idea for Dave's, and not taking anything away from the other founders, but sort of his idea and his like master architected plan. And the plan was for these guys, and if you don't know the story, there are 3 original founders. Between the 3 of them, they scraped together $900 to start Dave's Hot Chicken in a parking lot with no permits and like completely illegally, I'm sure. They did it with a portable fryer and an ice chest and an easy up to cover the kitchen. And they planned from the very beginning to inspire some interest from food bloggers so that it would slingshot them. And on the 3rd day they were open, they only made $40 a day for the first 3 days. On the 3rd day they were open, a food blogger from Eater LA, his name's Farley Elliott, showed up based on Armand having messaged him multiple times on Instagram. Showed up to try the food. He posts the story the next day, and it says, late night hot chicken stand, just might blow your mind. And the next day they get back on the 4th day open, and there's a line around the block, 80, 100 people deep. And they were slam busy, and they're using this tiny portable fryer. And, the lines didn't stop. And 8 months later, they had enough money with the help of one of the guy's brothers that came in and helped with some cash. They had enough money to open up a brick and mortar restaurant that opened to volumes of, I don't know, like probably at the beginning, probably $3 million a year. The time I joined, they were doing $5 million annualized. Wow. All off of 3 guys.
One location.
Wow. Yeah, and the location itself is sort of like, it's not prime real estate. It's not something that, it's not something we'd approve today. We would say no to a
Even
franchise.
better. So
Yeah.
so your
As
rentals
I
are
walked up to that one, I'm stepping over like syringes and like dirty syringes and like empty hypnotic bottles and homeless people, and you walk up and there's a line out the door, and the food was super good, and it's sort of like wow, like there's something special about this brand. And so that guy Armand, I think he sort of he's like a wizard, like literally, like he sort of created this whole thing in his mind and like pulled it, like he manifested it. And I know nobody believes that, but I really think he did it. Because they just created this brand, and they're like, then we're gonna find someone that's gonna help us franchise it. Like this is 7 years ago. They were talking about this in like somebody's, one of their bedrooms or one of their living rooms or kitchens or whatever, as they were probably like, rolling some joints and getting high. They're like, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna franchise it and we're gonna be millionaires. I'm not kidding. That's literally what they did, and that's literally what they did. It's sort of like if you've ever seen Ocean's 11 or one of those movies where they plan the heist, and while they're planning the heist, they play out a version of the heist, and it's like yeah, and then that's going to work, and sort of like they did that. They sort of imagined what was going to happen, and then it happened.
So you were saying that you see the story playing out
just like he called it.
Wow.
Yeah. One time I was talking to him on the phone, and he goes, I don't remember what we were talking about, probably law of attraction or something. And he goes, yeah, that's how I came up with the idea for Dave's. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I read this book. And I go, what book? And he said, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And I said, really? And he's like, yeah. And that's what sort of created Dave's. That me reading that book is sort of like how I came up with the plan.
Wow.
So I went and bought the book and I started listening to it. And it was, it's one of those things that's sort of like, I don't say life changing.
I may not believe in tarot, but I do believe in, law of attraction and manifestation.
Yes.
So
yeah. So it's just a really cool story. Those guys are
but that's awesome. I think, feels like a lot of soul in the brand.
Yes. And Armand always talks about the brand gives you back what you put in. Like he's sort of like
spiritual about it.
Yeah, spiritual about it. Yeah. Yeah,
Armand is really from?
Real. Armand is from Armenia. They're all Armenian. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he came here when he was 2. So he was actually born in Armenia and grew up here.
What's keeping you excited right now?
About Dave's or just in general?
In general. That include Dave's.
One of the greatest opportunities I've had since landing at Dave's. So I think earlier I talked about the idea that I wouldn't have left Carl's if not for some of the changes that occurred at Carl's. And the same thing happened to me at Blaze. I wouldn't have left Blaze if the things hadn't changed. And as it turns out, and I'm actually super grateful for the way it played out at Blaze. At the time I was really disappointed because it was sort of heartbreaking to see the change and how everything we built sort of like, I mean, it happens everywhere. Everything evolves and stuff, but just like the stark, like in 1 year's time, it was like, it went from this to this, and it was such a big change. And I think we had all believed that we were going to be working there for 20 or 30 years. The Wetzels had always talked about, this is the last job you guys are going to have. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh geez, I need a new job. I'm going to need a new job probably. And so the change was one of those things that at the time I was really resistant to, like, oh, this sucks. In retrospect, it was like the best thing that ever happened to me. I jumped over to Dave's. I landed at Dave's with a lot of knowledge and information and experience, having just come off of the Blaze experience, to help like scale it and grow it. When I landed at Dave's, there were 4 locations open. When I landed at Blaze, there were 2. It was really close. The things were very similar. There was even less created at Dave's in terms of scalable systems and processes, and materials and all of the structural things. But I already knew how to do it. I was able to hire my entire team from Blaze clandestinely, like under the radar. I hired them all hourly and just started creating materials and job aids and everything. On the way out the door at Blaze, I had asked for more time to sell the last chunk of my options, and there was this whole negotiation that went on where They wanted me to sign a separation agreement that had like a no disparagement policy and a anti-solicitation policy and all of these things in there in order for them to grant me whatever 6 months. They also offered to pay me the money during COVID. They did like a 30% salary reduction to sort of like make sure the company was going to be okay, which is fine. Like I want to keep the job, so like do whatever you want to do. And so they offered me, if I signed that agreement, the money they owed me, as well as the ability to sell my options, more time to sell my options. And I sort of had the attitude of like, I mean, you should give me the time to sell my options because I built this company for the last 8 years, you know. And the guy I talked to said, you know, that's not how it works. And I was like, it's not how it works because you're making it not how it works. It could work that way. And he's like, it's not how it works. And then, and I said, you should be giving me the money that you scraped during the crisis because we all worked our butts off to make sure everything was great. And he goes, it's not how it works. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. He's like, so should I send the agreement over? And I go, that's not how it works. I'm not signing that agreement. I said, and let me just tell you something. I had no interest in poaching people or anything other than maybe a couple of the key people that would have wanted to switch out anyway because they wanted to upgrade and, you know, add new people and stuff. And I was more than willing to sort of like work with them on that and say, hey, I'd like to hire. We had no money. We had 4 locations. We didn't even have a company store open when I landed at Dave's. So there wasn't, you know, we were completely operating off of a very small amount of royalty and the initial capital. So the idea that I was like going to hire my whole team full time and steal everybody from Blaze was just silly on its face. But I told him on this phone call, I said, I go, you actually just made it really easy for me because I'm not required to.
So you left your options on the table for that?
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I did. I said no thanks. And like I said, I immediately hired literally the entire team. I was paying them like $25 an hour to do. It was, you know, it worked out perfect. It was like this, like we didn't have a lot of money anyway, so to try to hire everybody in on salary, I actually supercharged our ability to get stuff up and running really quickly. And they're sort of forcing me into that position made it that much easier to make it happen. So we landed at Dave's, practically my entire team and I, and we were.
But that speaks volumes of your leadership as well, because for the team to jump, you know, with you is a big deal.
Well, we had a great team at Blaze, and we have an even greater team at Dave's, and only 1 or 2 of the people didn't come with us, and that's okay.
That's
you know,
okay.
yeah. I mean,
that's fair.
There's one guy that I say is the one that got away, but I think it ultimately was the best thing for him and his family to kind of like be stable there. So you know, it's good for him. But
what's keeping you excited personally?
Oh, so I was getting there. Sorry. One of the best opportunities that happened from Dave's during the conversation process with Bill. I said, I'd love to be a franchisee someday. And he said, we can make that happen. We did it at Wetzel's Pretzels. A lot of his executives, and I think he did it. Bill is a really shrewd, like smart guy. He's a super generous, kind man, but he's also very shrewd. And so he had created the opportunity at Wetzel's for a lot of his executives to be franchise owners. I think he did that to sort of supplement incomes, to not have to pay them a ton, but they were making Wetzel's is super profitable. He created such a great business out of Wetzel's. I think it doesn't get the credit it deserves, but you know, those people who own Wetzel's Pretzels make a lot of money off of, you know, basically a pretzel stand in a mall somewhere. And so he created that opportunity for several of his executives, and he told me at the time, he's like, we did it at Wetzel's. And within probably 6 months of me landing there, he sort of offered me the opportunity to become a franchisee. So our CFO and I are partners in franchising in Inland Empire of Southern California. We have 2 locations open. We're working on our next 2. We have a 7-unit agreement, and it's been sort of like a life-altering experience. Remember, I started my story where I began working at a franchised Jack in the Box. I didn't even know what a franchise was when they said the owner's coming on that first day, and I said, and there was those commercials with Jack. I go, Jack's coming, and they said no, Neil. I was like, who's Neil? He's like, he owns 3 Jack in the Boxes. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I had no idea what that meant.
Yeah.
And so today, my wife and I are franchise owners of Dave's Hot Chicken and their high volume units, and we're super stoked. And so we're pretty excited about what that means for us and our future. And I think that the brand itself, Dave's Hot Chicken brand, I mentioned earlier that we've got this really strong team, and I think that we're well positioned to continue to grow and offer a lot of opportunities to the people that came with us, to the people that we've met here, to the franchise owners, and it's going really
How many
well.
Daves today?
163.
Wow. 4 years?
Yeah.
No, less than
since
that.
we started franchising. So we opened the first like actual franchise store that's not affiliated with a founder or somebody from the corporate team in January of 2021. So what is this? This is going to be January 2024. So three years.
Oh man, that's blazing fast.
Yeah. The first 7 restaurants or so are somehow associated or affiliated in one way or another. So that, I think it was the 8th restaurant, was not affiliated in any way. And so, it depends on what calendar you're using, but essentially 3 or 4 years. We've built about 150 stores.
What's keeping you excited personally? What are you?
So my daughter is about to graduate with her master's. My oldest son is about to graduate. He's about a year and a half out. He works at Dave's with us, and then my what I call my middle child. His name's Nick. He just started school, and he texts me all the time saying these classes aren't challenging. I don't know why I'm here. And then
you have a rebel there, huh?
Yeah, and then my 10-year-old. He's got the whole world ahead of him. So I'm excited for them, and I'm excited for the sort of the ability to offer them opportunities that that weren't available to me or to my wife when she was a kid. So I'd say that's the most exciting part.
Jim, this was a phenomenal story and a great conversation.
Thank you.
Many takeaways, but I think one thing I can definitely see is that the compounding of your work and relationships, those brought you all the opportunities one after the other. Is commendable. That speaks volumes. Both sides. People who called you for the opportunity as well as people who followed you for the one.
When you say the word opportunity, that adds one dimension or one sort of component about what's exciting. To your point about the people that came with us, one of the things that I've always tried to do is to find people within our existing system that have the aptitude or the capability, the skill set to grow. And I think you mentioned at the very beginning about the restaurant industry in general. People who land in the restaurant industry do so because it's convenient or it's close by, or they'll work with my hours or whatever that is. They sort of fall into it, like you said. And a lot of times people that end up in the restaurant industry aren't on a typical college-bound trajectory.
Correct.
But that doesn't mean that they're not super capable. It usually means that they're probably the children of immigrants that either don't have the knowledge or didn't have the access, or they don't currently have the access financially. And we've built our whole team on what I call restaurant kids. I was a restaurant kid. And so we built our whole team on these people that have the ability to do something, but maybe they don't have the original training, or they've shown some type of talent for it. And you sort of grab them and you help them develop it. And so one of the things I'm most excited about is the opportunities that we're creating for, this generation of restaurant kids who are usually mostly immigrant born, a lot of Hispanic people, because in California especially, there are a lot of Hispanic folks in the restaurant industry, but people of all stripes are in the restaurant industry. And so by offering them opportunities and seeing Dave's grow and they grow with it, that's one of the most exciting parts of it.
That is so wholesome and amazing. The fact that you recognize and restaurant kids is the term that I'm taking from
Yeah,
this. That's amazing.
Well, the restaurant industry allows you to apprentice into. You can go from being the grill cook to the owner, and I mean the amount of time that it takes is completely up to you and the opportunities that sort of present themselves. It took me from 15 to 45 or 40, whatever 48. For that to happen for me, my oldest son invested in our business. He's 21, so he went from 15 to 21, where he's like an actual investor in a business. So it just depends on, he's a lot smarter than I am, and but it allows you to do that, and so that's what's so cool about the restaurant industry.
Super, Jim. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
I did too. Thank you.